Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, October 16th. I'm Mark Dent here with Katherine Laidlaw, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Today, we are going to talk about cons. Yes, scams, they are the worst. And specifically, we are going to talk about Johnathan Walton, who, after losing nearly $100,000 to a con woman, has become this sort of vigilante who helps people fight against cons. So we'll get to that and to the biggest news in business and tech right after this.
Being a know-it-all used to be considered a bad thing, but in business, it's everything. Because right now, most businesses only use 20% of their data, unless you have Hubspot, where data that's buried in emails, call logs, and meeting notes become insights that help you grow your business. Because when you know more, you grow more. See, being a know-it-all isn't so bad after all. Visit HubSpot.com today to learn more.
Starting off, it's not a great time for electric vehicles. Under the Trump administration, the U.S. has backed off from transitioning to electric vehicles, and that attitude is now starting to spread around the globe. According to the Wall Street Journal, countries like Canada and England are reevaluating goals and mandates for electric vehicles, and automakers over the last couple of years have started shifting some of their focus away from electric vehicles as consumer adoption has not picked up as expected. Also in cars, Waymo announced it will bring driverless taxis over the pond to London next year. For now, the company will begin testing its autonomous vehicles on London streets with human safety drivers behind the wheel while it waits for the green light from the government. This is the latest international expansion for Waymo, which announced a testing pilot in Japan earlier this year. I, for one, think they're going to need to take a lot longer in London because it makes no sense how they drive over there. So those Waymos, they better get a lot of practice. All right, on to some AI. Ohio Representative Thaddeus Claggett introduced a bill banning marriage between humans and AI chatbots, and this also would prevent bots from gaining any legal status related to marriage. Some users have apparently expressed an interest in wedding bots, which doesn't surprise us, considering the woman who claimed to have married and divorced a 300-year-old ghost pirate. It is also basically the plot of the movie Bicentennial Man from the late 90s, if anyone remembers that. And somewhat related, though, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman announced that the company will soon relax restrictions originally put in place to mitigate mental health issues now that it has new tools. Users will then be able to change ChatGPT's personality to be friendlier, more, quote, human-like, end quote, and for verified adults to engage in, quote, erotica, end quote. Altman said the changes reflect OpenAI's one more quote, treat adults like adults, end quote, principle. Maybe this proposed bill from this Ohio representative has a reason, Katherine, to exist.
I was just thinking that, I saw some people talking about these changes yesterday evening, and they were sort of bemoaning, like, why does it always end in erotica? This type of stuff. And I'm like, because humans are smutty. I don't know what to tell you.
It always ends in erotica and it begins in erotica because, that's how the internet basically came into existence.
That's
because
right.
of erotica. But you were also saying, though, that you noticed that Sam Altman, at least, was really holding court on Twitter, or X rather, and just really communicating with people about it, at least.
Say what you will about Sam Altman, and maybe he will be the downfall of, the human species, and that would be obviously unfortunate. But I will say, in terms of sort of CEOs, he definitely seems to sort of roll up his sleeves and get down into the fray in a way that I can't help but respect. You don't see Bill Gates doing that. You don't see CEOs of many other really prominent tech companies doing that. And I just sort of appreciate that he at least seems to be embracing his more human side when he does that. And, I'm a huge Andrew Garfield fan. And so the fact that he's playing him in whatever movie is going to be coming out about this is maybe swaying my opinion a little bit. Yeah. But I do always kind of like seeing a CEO getting in there and speaking to the people and sort of defending or taking feedback in ways that seem constructive.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, Sam Altman is not a robotic CEO. No question about that. No. All right. Finally, in something that has nothing to do with AI, J.M. Smucker Company is suing Trader Joe's, alleging that the grocer infringed on trademarks related to its Uncrustables. That's the $1 billion frozen sandwich brand that we actually talked about, I think, just last week. And Smucker has also taken offense to similar packaging featuring a sandwich with a missing bite. I don't know. I looked at this Trader Joe's thing and yes, it is similar, but like, does anyone really have, the whole market cornered on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without crust? I don't know.
I was thinking, is it the crimped edges that really like tips it over the edge? I don't know. I'm curious to see.
They do look a lot alike, I will say.
So it's maybe like the sandwich design that was the downfall in this particular instance.
It's just kind of awesome to see like the legalese regarding peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like they're using terms like irreparable injury and wrongful acts. It's like, it's just a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But hey, it's $1 billion peanut butter and jelly sandwich, so fair enough, I guess.
I don't know. My dad might have said that about a sandwich missing a bite. It's possible.
Hey, it's Anna Sale, host of Death, Sex, and Money, the show from Slate about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. Many of us have something going on behind closed doors, like a listener we called Elizabeth, who told us she's a hoarder.
I see mess beyond probably what most people think of when they think of mess.
We'll work through it all together on Death, Sex, and Money. Listen wherever you get podcasts.
Before we get to the main story, just know for more stuff like that, subscribe to the show and we'll have more for you tomorrow. And now let's move on to the main story. As I said earlier, we're talking about cons and scams and this vigilante guy who's trying to rein some con artists in. His name's Johnathan Walton. And Katherine, you wrote a story about him and the business that he has started. But before we get to him, though, tell me what's really going on here? How bad are cons right now?
So I've done a little bit of reporting on cons over the last few years, but it does seem like they have sort of gotten both uniquely bad in the sense that we're losing more to cons than ever before. The FBI released an annual report about this that said that in 2024, $16.6 billion were lost to online scams. And that's up from $1.4 billion in 2017. Yeah. So that's not even 10 years ago.
That's just incredible to think about. $1 billion is already a lot.
It's a lot.
And so we're talking 16-fold increase over $1 billion.
So I was sort of curious, okay, how are people doing this? But then I just sort of stopped and looked at my own phone. And I don't know if you get this, but even in the last couple of weeks, I've gotten text messages from people posing as recruiters for jobs that don't exist, or even just as simply as a text from a random number being like, hey, do you have a minute to chat? Which looks like it conceivably could be from someone that you once knew and maybe accidentally deleted their phone number, things like this. Cons have not just gotten more expensive for all of us, but they've also gotten more sophisticated.
They've gotten kind of good.
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago, you had to almost go looking for scams in some ways. Like if you were on Craigslist and there was somebody selling something that seemed kind of dodgy, and then somehow that person would get your email kind of thing. And now, there are typos. Sometimes it's not perfect grammar kind of stuff, but these are good scams. And there's a lot of stories. I think you pointed this out. I think it was a New York Times reporter who covers scams as a job, almost fell for one.
Yeah. It's getting harder and harder to parse out. And I'm glad you mentioned the grammar, because as a grammar nerd, I have really noticed that the typos used to be an obvious tell. My mom would get these messages and be like, does this seem legit? And I'm like, Mom, this is a Nigerian prince you don't know. There's nothing legit about this. Where now I find their typos are way fewer and farther between, especially online. There aren't those obvious tells anymore. And so you have to be very protective or very insular in ways that I think don't necessarily come naturally to all of us.
And so Johnathan Walton is this vigilante now who hunts down con artists. His origin story involved someone who he thought was a friend.
So what I thought was so interesting about him, when I saw these statistics, I was like, this is crazy. And one thing that is so endemic to the experience of getting conned is you don't want to talk about it. There's still, I think, quite a lot of shame and a lot of stigma around it. And so even the statistics that come out about it are generally considered to be underreported because people don't want to admit that they have fallen for these cons. And then Johnathan Walton comes along, who goes completely the opposite way and wants to tell everybody that he has experienced this con from, as you say, like a friend of his who was actually originally a neighbor in his building. He lives in LA. He worked for many years as a reality TV producer. And there was this issue in their apartment building where the swimming pool had sort of fallen into disrepair. And there was this legal weird shenanigan going on with the swimming pool in their building. And so he was bandying a bunch of neighbors together to rally support to get the swimming pool back in action. And this woman, Mayor Smith, came to this neighborhood meeting and really made an impact. You know, she was dressed to the nines. She had a ton of natural charisma, really magnetic. And he was drawn to her right from the get-go. And they became really good friends really quickly. And it wasn't until a couple years later that she needed to borrow a little bit of money, and he loaned it to her. Her boyfriend paid him back the next day. So that was all fine. And then, you know, further down the line, she needed to borrow a little bit more money and then a little bit more money. And then eventually it was sort of to the tune of like $60,000. And that was the point where he realized through sort of a series of things that didn't quite add up that he was out $60,000 and would likely never see that money again, and then needed to sort of pay for legal representation and hire investigators and things like that. So it ended up sort of racking up to the tune of $100,000. But what I found so interesting about his story was when he went public, two things happened. One, it expedited the process of getting justice, because one point he makes is that police departments are a lot like any department in any office. You know, if the more straightforward things are, the more likely it is to maybe get results. And so cops in fraud cases, often they can be a little bit hard to parse. The paper trails can be a little bit hard to follow. And so the clearer you can be with sort of presenting your story, as it were, your experience, the more likely it is that you're going to see some action. And that was very much his experience. So going public elicited a whole bunch of other victims of this woman. They sort of came out of the woodwork, which helped him rally support and then go to the police. And the other thing that happened that I found was so interesting was he released a podcast about his experience and has since written a book. And so when I asked him if he has made the $100K back, he said multiple times over by really leaning into this as this sort of con victim.
And he's also become somewhat of a consultant because of the fact that some of his writing and podcasting has gotten fairly popular. It sounds like he helps people like with, you know, affidavits, you know, researching police documents and talking to police, things like that.
Yes, that's exactly right. One thing I thought was so interesting that he talked about was he said he sees a lot of similarities with pitching the police as his experience pitching TV executives on show ideas. And so he helps people with that. When he started a blog after his experience with his former friend, he not only heard from victims of her, he was hearing from victims of cons all over the world, like hundreds of people. And he said that he can't help everyone, but he'll usually have like half a dozen to a dozen sort of cases on his docket. And this is obviously informal. And I asked if he's getting paid for this work. And he said, no, that would feel like kind of a con on his own. And that some people like to play golf on the weekends and some people like to hunt down con artists. But I think what he's really helping people do is sort of navigate the system after they've experienced something that has left them feeling really vulnerable and really uncertain with sort of where to go from here.
Yeah. I'm kind of in awe of what he's doing. It's great that he was able to turn this into such a kind of a business almost for him, and also to just sort of get some measure of justice back. But one thing that really stuck out to me in your story is it's like he said that when he meets someone new, he runs a background check if he's going to consider, you know, becoming friends with them. I mean, I guess you got to stay vigilant.
He has, as I mentioned, since written this book, and the thrust of the book is that there are a number of sort of red flags that exist in many of the kind of common cons, at least in the cons that are sort of in person, like person to person, less so in the sort of like random text messages that bots are sending out or like the Amazon scams that you'll see sometimes. But I said, okay, but in isolation, some of these red flags don't seem that bad. Like one of them is like people offering to help too much and too quickly. And I was sort of like, well, if you're in like a tough spot and someone's offering to help you, like, are you supposed to kind of turn on that person? You know, I think like there is this sense that you start looking for it everywhere. And so maybe start seeing it everywhere. But he told this funny anecdote about being at a party and this sort of like younger hot couple was working the room, and he started eavesdropping, and they were telling different origin stories to different groups of people. And as he was leaving, he sort of took the host aside and said, I don't have the bandwidth to look into this, but those people are con artists. And the host was kind of like, but you have to stay vigilant. Like there isn't a middle ground there, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. No middle ground with con artists, and don't marry AI. That's the lesson for today. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of Hubspot Media. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clarke. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. So if you're not subscribed, please go get signed up at thehustle.co/email and follow us on Instagram at The Hustle Daily. We will see you tomorrow.
Hey everybody, I've been listening to this great show lately. It's called The Next Wave, Your Chief AI Officer, hosted by Matt Wolf and Nathan Lands, and it's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. So you can catch The Next Wave with Matt Wolf and Nathan Lands, leading AI creators who are your guiding light in the AI and technology frontier. AI technology is transforming super fast, and it's changing every day, and the way we do business and the media landscape is all fragmented, but The Next Wave strives to be the leading podcast on AI technology and how you can actually apply it into growing your business. You can check them out wherever you get your podcasts.